Hi. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is By Hook or By Needles, and I am Sam. And I'm sorry for the little chuckle at the beginning. This is, I don't know how many times I've tried to start this. Because I keep laughing because I keep thinking of a certain thing that I said that was very inappropriate. And I'm not going to say it again because it was very inappropriate. I'm going to try and talk a little bit louder because someone did comment that I was very quiet in my last video, and I have no idea how to turn the volume up on the videos on my phone. If you know, please let me know in the description box, in the comments, because I'd love to know how I can turn my volume up, because I don't want to be shouting at the phone. So, and I'm using an iPhone, if that helps. If you want to tell me how to raise my volume or whatever, whether it's on the computer or on the iPhone, I'd really appreciate it. And I do get it because I listen to a lot of videos that are very quiet, and I've maxed out my screen's monitor's volume, so I had to go to the TV and put them on the TV so I can really amp up the volume so I can hear what they're saying. So I get it. It's an issue. It's a problem. So please, I'm not shouting at you. I'm just increasing my volume so that you can hopefully hear me a little bit better. I'm also trying to make have the mic nearer to me as well. So I apologize for the extra close-up. Okay, my top 10 rules for knitting and crochet. And there is a bonus one for knitters at the very end. My first one is you don't have to have any rules. You don't have to listen to anyone else's rules. You don't have to follow anyone else's suggestions. You can make your own rules, and that's great. I'm just sharing my rules. They might be helpful to somebody out there, and I'm hoping that they will help one or two people. So that's rule number one. You don't have to have rules, and you don't have to follow rules, and you don't have to listen to anyone else's rules. But having said that, please listen to my rules. I need the likes and the content. Okay. Rule number 2 is don't let anyone tell you that you're doing something the wrong way. And that's sort of akin to rule number 1. Don't let people say to you, and I've had this happen to me in doctor's surgeries, I've had people come up to me and say, you should try continental knitting, it's a lot faster. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And I have tried it. And you know what? When I do try it, my tension is so tight, you can't move the stitches along the needle. So it's, and occasionally I do try to do continental. And I try and do continental, or at least show people what continental will look like on my beginner knitter videos, because some people might want to do continental knitting, and I want to try and include everybody in the way I do my knitting, videos. So, yeah, don't listen to them, though. If someone's telling you, oh, throwers, so slow, and, oh, why do you knit like that? Or, you're holding your hook wrong. Why are you holding it like a knife? You should hold it like a pencil. Or, holding your yarn wrapped around your little your finger is not a very good way of tensioning your yarn. And there's so many experts out there telling you what to do, what not to do. Don't listen to them. It's your yarn, your hook and needles, your pattern, and it's going to be your finished project. So provided you are happy with how you hold your hook and yarn, it's comfortable, you can knit at a good speed or pace that you're comfortable and happy with, it doesn't cause you pain in your shoulders or hands or anything like that, then it doesn't matter. And if you love the finished product, it doesn't matter how you crochet or how you knit. All that matters is that you yourself are happy with what you're producing and you are enjoying the process. You've got to enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, there's no point in doing it. Which is another rule that comes up later on. Rule number 3 for me is to be mindful of your posture. And make sure you drop your shoulders and relax your grip. Now this is particularly useful for when I'm knitting. I'm more aware of this when I'm knitting, but I find, especially if I'm knitting on small circulars, which I love, the 9-inch, I think they're called 9-inch circulars, and they are about this big, with the needles, and you're knitting. It's taken me a while to get into the habit of just exhaling, dropping my shoulders, and relaxing my grip. So often people, and I do it, we get into a vice and we're death gripping these needles, and they're just tiny little needles and tiny little cord. We're gripping to them as though our life would depend upon it. And all that's going to do is cause your body to tense up, and that's why you raise your shoulders, and it's going to cause eventually pain. So just be mindful of it. You don't have to change it. If you're comfortable, knitting, holding on to your needles tightly, and that's fine. As long as you've got, once again, it's back to that second and first rules. You don't have to listen to any other one's advice. If they say you're gripping that too tightly, but you're happy with gripping it too tightly, and it's not causing you pain, and you're happy with your results, then what does it matter? But I do find with knitting in particular, it's now a habit for me, that I occasionally, like at the end of a row or a section, if I'm doing a cowl, they have like parts, and I get to the end of a part and I go, oh, okay, let's just relax, drop my shoulders. Yeah, my shoulders are dropped. Are they dropped enough? Yeah, I can't drop them any further. And then I loosen my grip again on my needles. Because really, even with those tiny little circular needles, you don't really need to grip them in the sense of like, oh, I'm going to lose the stitches on them, which was what I used to always knit like. I was always terrified that if I relaxed my grip too much, the needles would fall out and I'd lose all my stitches. And that indeed did happen a few times because my tension wasn't great and all the rest of it, and my needles were perhaps too slippery or whatever, but I did lose stitches. And maybe that's why I started death gripping. But you just need to sort of be able, especially with those little ones, you just need to be able to sort of cut them in your hand with your shoulders and elbows down and just sort of like, work stitches. Not working the needles, you're working the stitches, and you're just supporting the needles in your hands. You're just supporting their weight. You're not, so that would be, be mindful that it can happen, and it does happen, and could cause you pain and discomfort. And if it is, that's when you need to rethink the way you do it. And that's when I would say you are doing it wrong. If it's causing you pain, or, well, no, even if it's causing you pain, I mean, some people just have, I have automatic hand pain anyway. So, yeah, that's not necessarily a right way of saying it either. I mean, it's not even wrong. If you've got the normal levels of pain, just put it that way. As long as it's not causing you increased pain, more pain than you are normally experiencing in your hands or your shoulders or your body, then that's fine. You've got to be logical about it. You know what I mean? You've got to use a bit of common sense occasionally and go, okay, well, I've noticed every time I'm knitting, my shoulders get really tense. Just be mindful. That's all I'm saying, is be mindful of your posture. You know, that was my seat squeaking. Be mindful of your posture. Be mindful of how you're sitting. You know, it should be a relaxing experience, not a tense, anxiety driven one. Where am I? Number 4? Yeah. Now, this one is this is one people don't necessarily listen to or follow, and neither do I. But I'm going to put it in here anyway, because I think it's a good one for beginners. Always follow the yarn band instructions or recommendations for needle and or hook size and for gauge, etc., unless A, the pattern recommends otherwise, and a lot of patterns will recommend otherwise, especially a lot of lace work. You know, if you're working with a number 2 or a number 1 fine, which is equivalent to fingering, which is equivalent to, say, a 3 or a 4 ply, and they're telling you to use a hook or a needle that you might normally use for an 8 ply, which is a 3 weight, or a DK. They're doing that purposefully. There's a reason for it, and the reason is drape, normally. Especially if it's a shawl, if it's lace work, if it's a scarf. They've recommended a much thicker needle because they want to increase your drape. So stick to the ball band, the yarn band, unless the pattern tells you otherwise. Or B, you know from experience that following the yarn band recommendation doesn't work for you. And this is where a lot of knitters and crocheters are gonna say, that's right, because there's a lot of, I haven't got any handy, but there's a lot of yarns that will have a halo, especially mohair. Now I've got a really thin, beautiful mohair, and it does have a very thick halo. And they are recommending size 6mm needles. 6mm needles, oh gosh, what is that? Hang on. 6mm hook is a J. They're recommending a J for a yarn that you would normally use. Oh dear. Am I going to be able to find it? An E on. You know, you might normally use a 3.5mm. And the same goes for needles. You know, 6mm needles will normally, for a yarn that thin, without the halo, I would use a 3.25 or even smaller. Depends. So, yeah. And they also call the weight a DK, or they call the weight a bulky, or they call it a 10 ply, when you look at it and you think that's not a 10 ply. But we know from experience, from working with it previously, that, you know, it looks better, in our opinion, if we decrease or increase the size recommended on the ball band, and perhaps even we don't follow the recommendation on the pattern either, and that's fine as well. So it's one of those rules. It's not really a rule, it's just something you've got to be really wary of, because you don't want to be, you know, knitting an 8 ply yarn with a, you know, 3mm hook, unless you are making an amigurumi, for example. So that's another example of when you would not follow the ball band, but you would follow the pattern. Or, you know, even the pattern might say a 3.5mm, and you might think, no, I know my tension's too loose, I need to go down even more. Okay, so it's all to do with tension, drape, and what your previous experiences are. And as a beginner, you're not necessarily going to know what they are going to be, so you're best to follow the ball band and or the pattern until you sort of look at it and go, no, I'm not happy with the way that looks. I want to come down a hook size or a needle size. And then you do it again and you go, yeah, I'm much happier with that. And then you just sort of put that in the memory banks for next time. Number 5, count your stitches. Use stitch markers to mark between repeats if you need to help keep track of the rows or the rounds in a repeat. Unless, now, again, another unless you come to the end of the row or the round in particular and your stitch count is right. So if it says, you know, you're doing, say, a bobble, 2 stitches, a bobble, 2 stitches, a bobble, 2 stitches, and it tells you to do that to the last 2 stitches where you do just 2 stitches. Well, if you get to the last 2 stitches and you've done your bobble and 2 stitches and it says, okay, you've got 2 stitches left and you've got 2 stitches left, well then you pretty much know that you've got the right stitch count. But another caveat, when you're knitting something like, crocheting, sorry, something like this, okay, you need to stop occasionally and look at your work. And by that I mean, you know, you need to look at your work to see, yeah, okay, I've got a bobble at the top of every bit of red here. That's correct. I've got it all the way around. I haven't missed any bobbles. And that will stand out like a sore thumb. If you've missed a bobble on that round, or bobbles at the tops of these rounds, red stitches, you're going to know about it if you look at it. So stop every so often and hold up your work and look at it and go, does that look right? And if your answer is yes, it looks like the picture in the pattern, you've done it right. Okay, so check often, because the worst thing to do is having to frog. But also, like I say, if your stitch count is right and it looks right, then there's no reason why it shouldn't be right. So yeah, you wouldn't necessarily go back to count all the stitches. I've come unstuck with this many times. And with crochet, the worst part about crocheting is, let me see if I can find one. No. Okay, down here. I don't know if you can see it here, but I've worked in the first stitch. Hang on, which way are we doing it? That's the back, so you need to see it from the front. Hang on. Oh gosh, where was it? Okay, so here I've got 2 double crochet and a chain, 2 double crochet, oh, sorry, up here. 2 double crochet, a chain, and 2 double crochet. And it's telling me to not miss the first stitch. So don't miss the first stitch. Sometimes it will say skip the first stitch, and that will make your count very, very wrong if you don't read the instructions properly. I'm just trying to find if there's, see up here, for example, you can see, oops, I have missed the first stitch because it's told me not to put a stitch in the first stitch. Oh, no, I haven't. I have put a stitch in the first stitch there. Nope, there it is, up here. Up here. Oh, gosh. I haven't put a stitch in the first stitch. So be mindful of that sort of tricky little thing. Some corners will tell you skip that first, what they call hidden stitch, because they call it hidden because very often it might be hidden by the big fan of double crochets you've put in, or trebles, or whatever the case may be. So count your stitches, and you're better off, you know, I mean, if it's only 1 or 2 stitches, yeah, I fudge it. We all fudge it. Why wouldn't we? I mean, yeah. But if it's really something special, you want to make sure you get your stitch count correct. Oh, number 6. I think I'm up to number 6. Read your pattern. And no, I'm not talking about row 1, 2DC, number 2. No, I'm not talking about reading that sort of thing in your pattern. Read the special notes, read the special stitches, read the construction if it's a garment at the end. How do you construct it at the end? That will give you tips and hints on, okay, well, if I join it that way, that means I've got to do a certain, construct it a certain way. I don't necessarily join it here where normally I might join the shoulder line. I don't do that here because it's a raglan sleeve, for example. That sort of thing. So read your construction part, and then read the very beginning too. Now, I'm not going to name this designer because I think she's a brilliant designer. I really do. I love all of her stuff. But and you've got to get used to her style though of doing things. And English, I think, is her second language, or maybe it's even her third language. Who knows? But she tends to do she'll include instructions in the written part of the introduction even of the pattern. She doesn't even put this section in the pattern section of the pattern, where she might say it might just say something like, okay, the graph and the written instructions are for the small size. If you are doing the larger size blanket, then you must repeat. When you get to this row, go back to this row and repeat, these 20 rows or whatever it might be, 3 more times or 2 more times or whatever it was. And also at the same time, she'll give you a color chart of what color you use for each row. Now, if you look at that, okay, that goes from 1 to 370 or whatever it was on this particular blanket that I was making. And the graph only showed, 170 rows. That's your first clue that something's going on here. That's a really big error for any designer to make. So it can't, I say can't, it can, but more than likely it cannot be an error. So you've got to figure out what's the differentiation. And you will find that if you read the instructions. And I will say with this particular pattern, there were a lot of people on the Facebook group saying, my blanket's too short. It's not as long as everybody else's. Why is this section so short? Well, that section is so short because you didn't repeat it 3 times like was suggested you do for the larger size in the introduction of the pattern. Now, this is just her style of doing things because she does it with all of them. So it's a matter of and this is why you read the patterns. Sometimes it can be really boring stuff, but you read the patterns. And also with this pattern, you could have done it horizontally or you could have done it vertically. The repeat would be the same, like she marks on the graph what the repeat is. But you have to know, well, am I doing it horizontally or am I doing it vertically? Well, that information will tell you, you know, you can do it either way you want to do it, depending on the look you want to get. So if you did it horizontally, well, then you didn't do all the repeats. And you would get, you know, a blanket that was wide as everyone else's who was doing it vertically, but you just didn't do as many rows because the rows were the width, not the length, if that makes sense. And maybe it doesn't for some of you, but I'm hoping it will for most. So read the intro, because there's nothing worse. And these people, my heart broke for them, because they were like, well, I didn't see it say that, it didn't say, and it doesn't say it. It doesn't say it in the pattern. It doesn't say when you got to row 50, now go back and repeat rows 20 to 54 times. It doesn't say it in the pattern, because as she explained, the pattern is for the small size. It's not for the big size. But there are a few clues there. Like I say, the color changes were a clue. It's got 373 rows, or whatever it was, on the pattern colors. But the graph is only 150 or 200 or whatever it was. That's your clue. There's something going on here. What's the difference? What's going on? And even though I had read the instructions, when I got to that row where I had to start repeating, I was like, hang on, why is the pattern changing? I'm sure from the pictures, and I went and looked at the pictures, the pattern was meant to be that like that for a large chunk. Then I remembered, oh yeah, at this row I've got to repeat these rows. So, but I would never have had that oh yeah moment if I hadn't have read the instructions. So again, it's boring. Sometimes it can be very, very boring and very annoying to have to read instructions, but different designers write their patterns differently. So until you get used to the way they write, you really should be reading everything, especially the special stitches. In fact, with another one of her patterns, and I haven't done this pattern myself, but I've seen the same question being asked about the starting chain count and why the repeat isn't working for them, and it's because they didn't do the right number of chain at the beginning. And the reason they didn't do the right number of chain at the beginning was because there was a little bit of math that apparently you need to do in order to get the right chain count for, again, the size you require. But she puts all that math in there, and she puts all the chain stitches in there and tells you how to do it all. And if you don't read the introduction, then you weren't going to know that. I can't remember the name of it, and like I say, I'm not going to say anything because I don't, like I say, I love this woman's designs. They're brilliant, and she's brilliant. But you've got to be mindful that the way she writes them is she'll put the written part for the smallest size usually, or the sample size even, and then she'll give you instructions in the introduction for what to do for all the larger sizes that you might want to do. It's just the way she works. So I know if I ever do that pattern, I really need to go back to those, the introduction to make sure that I know what I'm doing. Actually, and I saved my friend who was doing exactly the same design. And I said, oh, what row are you up to? And she said, oh, whatever it was. And it was 2 past the point where you had to repeat. I said, are you repeating this row to this row? No. Why? I said, okay, go to this, go and read the introduction. And she, she goes, oh my gosh, you saved me. So she only had to frog 2 rows or whatever it was. So, and she goes, why doesn't it say it in the pattern? Everyone's like, why doesn't it say it? Because she's told you. She's given you it for the smaller size. And that's just the way she does it. But anyway, I'm waffling now. Number 7. 7. Okay. Okay, this is going to be controversial. And I know it's going to be controversial. And I don't mean for it to be controversial. But sewing your ends every night. Every night. I never used to do this. And I'm not someone who hates sewing in ends anyway. And the reason I became someone who doesn't hate sewing in ends is because I went from waiting until the end of the project to sewing in half a dozen at the most ends every night on the project. And it's like anything else you do. It becomes a habit. It's like the dropping the shoulders. It's like relaxing your grip. It becomes habitual after a while. Especially if you introduce this habit into another habit in your life, or another section of your life that is a habitual or ritual thing you do. So what I was decided to do was, okay, I need to sew in my ends as I go. And at this stage, I hated doing it. But I thought, how can I remind myself to do it and make myself do it? Now, every night before I go to bed, I have a cup of coffee. Coffee doesn't affect me. It doesn't keep me awake. I don't drink decaf. I don't need to drink decaf. I drink caffeinated. It doesn't really affect me. It doesn't. No, only joking. But caffeine doesn't affect me. But I make my cup of coffee, and I'd bring it down, and I'd put it down, and I'd pick up my project, and you will see that this one has only one end that is not sewn in. Where is it? Oh, it is sewn in. All the ends are sewn in. So there you go. This project, all the ends are sewn in. I sew them in every time I finish a section, or every time I finish a round, or a row, or whatever the case may be. And I do it at night. It's my last thing I do at night. And my mindset is, I can start the day afresh. I can start the day with a nice, clean, end-free project. And it is really quite nice to wake up and you go, oh, wow, I'm so glad I sewed in those ends last night. And that's the mindset you can start getting into. You're drinking your cup of coffee at night. It's the last thing you're doing at night before you put your crochet away. You just sew in half a dozen at the most ends, if that. And boom, you're done. How easy. It can be very hard for some people, I know, to force themselves, and they do have to force yourselves, and I had to force myself into sewing in those ends. But once you attach it to another ritual or another routine that you do, and it doesn't have to be a bedtime routine. You could do it first thing in the morning with your morning cuppa. If that's your, sit down, sew in all your ends, and make it a morning routine or ritual before you start your crochet for the day. It just depends which way around you want to work it. Now, someone did say to me, like, I've sewn in all my ends, and and that's to mark the last stitch, because I've actually sewn the end away. And I don't know if I've marked the end of the other end. No, I haven't. Anyway, someone questioned me on this. They sort of said, hang on. What if you've made a mistake and you've sewn in all your ends? What do? It's very hard to unpick a sewn in end. And she's right. And I said, you're 100% correct. It's not easy to unpick a woven in end. And that is why before I weave in any ends, I remember, can you get out of the way so I can read my rules? Thank you. Beep, beep, good boy. I remember hold it up. Does it look right? Does it look like the picture? Yes, it does. count my stitches. Have I got the right number of stitches? Yes, I do. Now it's safe to sew my ends in. I haven't made a mistake. I've got the right number of stitches. The pattern looks right. I can sew my ends in. It's safe to do so. And that's my answer to this person was. But in the same token, if you're worried that, like for example, I've got a grey and a green here. If you're worried you might have miscounted or skipped a stitch or whatever the case may be, then don't weave in those last two colours. And then, you know, do them the next time. I mean, there's no big deal. It's only going to be two ends rather than literally hundreds of ends. You know? And once again, it's just a habit. It's something you can do to get used to sewing your ends. Now I'm going to show you something that goes with this blanket. Well, I haven't got them yet because I haven't made them yet. I will have 48 of these. And I think it is 12 of them will have a second row in the pink, or in this reddish color, sorry. 12 will have a second row in the light purple. 12 will have a second row in the dark purple, and I think 12 will have a row in the green. 48. That's going to be 4 ends per flower. This is why I've made a video, another video. I'm trying to work out whether it's worth continuing the blanket, because I've got to then attach them randomly, and I really don't know if I want to be bothered with all these ends. And I want to do the pattern, but I don't want to do all the flowers the way they're telling me to do the flowers. So I've got a big decision to make. You know, I've deliberately left a longer strand here so I can sew it to the blanket if I do it. All of them have got, and I've got like this many so far, and all those lovely ends. I haven't sewn them in yet, no, because the middle one, like I say, I was going to use to sew to the blanket, and the second one I was going to perhaps crochet over and see if I could get away with just crocheting over it rather than, you know, I thought if I crochet over it for a section and then weave it back in the opposite direction, it'll be easier to weave in because I'm not weaving in both ends, you know, both directions. But anyway, that's it. I've sort of basically done that video there. Number 8. When choosing a border color for your blanket or any garment you might make, and you want to put a border on it, or a hat or anything that might have lots of colors in it, like this has got lots of colors in it, I have 2 rules. A is always use the darkest color that is in the project. So, for example, if I was trying to work out what color I want to use for this, for a border, say this didn't have a border on it, I would go with the dark purple, because that is the darkest color in this colorway. Or B, I use the most dominant color in the project. And that can be usually determined by how many balls of yarn you bought, you know, which was the maximum. And I think for this one, the maximum might have been the dark green, I think. Or the dark green, I think. Sometimes you find that the dominant color is also the darkest color, so that makes it really easy. But they're my 2 rules. And I don't think I've ever varied from them. I've always used either the darkest colour or the most predominant colour. And like I say, a lot of the time they are the same. They are the same. The one and the same. So that's my rule that I follow, because I'm not very good with colours, but I find that always looks pretty good. If it's a 50-50, like I've done a spiral blanket, which was black and white spirals, I used the black to edge it because the white just didn't look right. But it is personal choice. But that would be my advice to people who are wondering, well, what colour should I border this with? Think about those two choices, the darkest or the most dominant, and work it out. Do a side of the blanket and go, no, I don't like that, and then use the other one, no, I don't like that, and say, well, Sam's talking rubbish. And that's perfectly okay. You can say that. Number 9. Oh, we're getting there. If I have not worked on a project for between 6 to 8 weeks, I frog it. I do. I honestly do. When I come across it and go, oh my goodness, yeah, I remember this. I didn't, I haven't worked on that for a while. I frog it. I frog it for a few reasons. I frog it to release the stress of knowing that I'm not going to finish it. Because if I haven't touched it in 6 to 8 weeks, I know that I've lost interest in either the design, the pattern, or whatever the case might be, or I found another project that I'm working on, so I frog it. But there are caveats again. There are exclusions. Now, I would never frog something like this, obviously. You're not going to frog something with multiple colour changes. So what would I do with this? Because this isn't finished. And I haven't touched this in 6 to 8 months because of these. So I've got a choice. I either throw it away, well, that's just being wasteful and stupid, in my opinion. So what do I do with it? Well, I can either put a border on it and call it done, or I can put it away until a time when maybe I'm in the mood for doing lots of little flowers and lots of little ends. Yeah, they're really my only choices, because you can't frog something like that. So, yeah, they're your two choices. If it's multiple colour like that, you can't frog it. But also, if I pick up something, and this was the case with this, I got to the, finished the circle. I finished the circle, and I did each corner separately, one at a time. No, I didn't, sorry. I did each portion of this, like I did the grey and then the purple, and then I went and did the grey and the purple on the next corner. But I did run out of a colour. So it was in the 6 to 8 bracket before I went and ordered more of the same colour again. So that's another exclusion. I'm not going to frog it if I'm actually, the only reason it's in the 6 to 8 week not touched range is because I'm waiting on the finances to buy the colour, or I'm waiting on, finding another project so that it's worth the postage to, rather than buying one skein of yarn to buy, the colour. So that's another exclusion as to why I wouldn't frog it. Oh, and the other one is it brings me joy. And I really do love this blanket. So why would I frog it? Even if it was a solid colour and there weren't loads of ends. Why would I frog something if actually, even unfinished, it does give me some sort of joy? And that is why I would border it and call it quits, if that's the decision that I actually wanted to make. But like I say, that's once again my rule. Frogging is very cathartic. especially if it's a pattern that you didn't enjoy and you haven't gotten very far on. It reduces your whips. It reduces your stress if you have stress over whips. It reduces the stress of whips because you're suddenly like, well, I haven't got 50 whips anymore. I've only got 5. And I know a lot of people get startitis and they start a million projects, leave them for 6 to 8 weeks and all the rest of it. Well, I'd be just, like I say, I frog them. And then the yarn just goes back into my yarn stash. Number 10. And this is sort of in conjunction with number 9. Don't force yourself to finish a project that you have lost joy in. Right now, I've lost joy, even though it gives me joy to look at because I love the design and I love the blanket. This does not give me joy right now. So I'm not going to do it right now. I'm hoping to get some joy back for it. Of course, sometimes you don't have a choice. Even if something doesn't give you joy, you've got to finish it. Like if it's a commission piece. That would be the only reason why I would do something that doesn't give me joy. I recently just sewed together crocheted together the pieces for a hexagonal, Tunisian hexagonal mosaic blanket because I lost joy in making the hexagons. So I never actually completed the project, but I've sewed all the pieces together and I looked at it and go, okay, yep, to me that's done, I'm finished. Maybe one day I might pick it up again and add more hexagons to it if I find some joy in doing it again. I found the hexagons were too large and I lost interest at around about row 15 to 20 and they were like 35 rows each and it's just, yeah. So there are my 10 rules. Don't make anything that doesn't give you joy because crocheting is all about joy. The number 11 rule, the rule for knitters, because this doesn't exist for crocheters, is use a lifeline. If you're doing something complicated, especially if you've never done it before, use a lifeline. And I do talk about a lifeline in another video I've done, and I am going to actually do a video. Well, I sort of almost did do a video on adding a lifeline. It was in the part 2 of knitting for knitters brioche, and I show you how to do a lifeline. So I'll put the link to that if I remember in the description box if you want to go and have a look at how to do a lifeline. But if you're doing lace work, even cables or brioche, put a lifeline in. It's going to save you so much work because they're very easy to make mistakes, and it's very hard to frog those, especially lace work and brioche. It's very hard to frog them and pick up stitches on that frogged piece because of all the yarn overs and all the rest of it. The cable work isn't so hard to pick up, but yeah. So that's it. That's my 10+1 rules for knitting and or crochet. I'm sorry, I really waffled. I'm a waffler. But I hope you've gotten, even if one rule rings true for you or makes you think, yeah, maybe I could do that. It's worth it. Well, for me, it's been worth it. So anyway, I'm going to say, learn from the past. Like, not having sewn in all your ends. But think about the future and always, always, always live for today. Take care, everybody. See you later. Bye.